Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root, where we dive deep into understanding and addressing root causes of chronic health issues so you can help and find healing inside and out, now and forever. Hello, and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root. I'm Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective. Welcome to the podcast. So today I wanted to give a bit of an overview of me, my life, kind of where I am health and wellness wise. And with everything that happened last year, my now husband, Jonathan, got diagnosed with, we started living RV life kind of late 2024, March 2025, he got diagnosed with cancer. And then within less than a month later, he had started chemo treatment and he went through 12 rounds of chemo in 24 weeks. So every other week he was getting infusions, and it was a very challenging time, to say the least. But also, and I feel like I gave some updates around that, but also coming out of that period of time was actually almost harder than going through the chemo journey itself. And what I see so often is this is the case with women's health, where you're able to push through, you're able to get through the stressful period of time, and it's the coming out of that that can be very challenging. And so I want to talk about my experience. I've also been through burnout so many times, and I will also tell you this was different. This was a different level of burnout that also came with a handful of other things that, now that I'm kind of out of the cancer space and out of this, and have talked about that kind of experience with a handful of people, this is actually incredibly common, to not only for the caretaker, but also for the person going through the experience itself. So I want to touch on this because I do think it is relevant, not only from a cancer perspective, but also from a acute health crisis perspective. And I want to share some things about that. I also want to share some things about our relationship that I now feel ready to talk about, that I think are also going to be really valuable to share in some of the struggles that we experienced, once again, like coming out of that journey and coming out of that space. I want to talk a little bit more about my gut health and maintenance when it comes to that, and just overall maintenance when it comes to gut health. And we get this question all the time with our clients. Okay, so I'm doing, working with you guys, going through protocols, doing the whole thing. But what about long term? What does this really look like? And so I want to share my experiences with that in comparison to how we talk about this oftentimes, and some things to think about. I may also touch a little bit on hormones and my experience going through early perimenopause again, and then also falling into a place of what I would really consider, I don't have an official diagnosis, nor do I deem it super necessary for my own benefit, but going through PMDD for a handful of months, and what my experience was, that also some of the things I did to come out of that. And if I have time, I also want to talk about skincare a little bit. So this is going to be, once again, a little bit of hodgepodge episode, but there are so many important nuggets of information that I talk about so oftentimes with clients, that I also think, just as listeners, that this could be really helpful and really valuable for you. And I think there's just a lot of things to really, really think about when going through, especially when going through big stressful events, like very big stressful events. And what does that really look like, not only getting through, but also coming out? So let's start with the burnout piece. And I'll say this is going to be, if I had to pick one overarching message, this is it, is overcoming burnout. And what did this really look like for me? So I've been burnt out, quote unquote, burnt out many, many, many times before. And certainly when I was going through my own healing journey, this this looked pretty intensive. And I have shared it, probably not in quite some time, but I went through so many different supplement protocols, so many different healing protocols, specifically for burnout, and some of the most clinically intensive protocols that exist out there with some really, really, really smart people, smart practitioners, and none of them stuck. While I felt support during many of them, and I learned a lot going through all these supplement protocols for sure, it never lasted more than about a month or two after stopping the supplements, which for me meant they didn't work. They were a good band-aid, they were supportive, but they didn't address the underlying reason or reasons as to why the burnout happened in the first place. And this time around, I mean, I knew exactly why I was burnt out. The stress of moving into this kind of RV style of life was very, very, very different for me. I was totally on board doing this. So there was no hesitation on my part. I knew intuitively in my gut, like this was absolutely the right decision. And that doesn't mean that it didn't come with some fears and hesitations, and the logical part of my brain, my ego, my protector part of my brain certainly had a lot to say going into this. And especially, living in such a small place when Jonathan and I had been together for not even 6 months at the time. And then there was also some logical things of, okay, what if this doesn't work out? And now we've invested in this whole style of life, got this camper, got a new truck, like did a lot of things. And what if it didn't work out? And so there was that underlying piece still there. End of 2025, early into like January, or I'm sorry, late 2024 into early 2025. And then in early 2025 as well, Jonathan had some health stuff going on that I felt stressed about and I felt pressured to help and support, not from him, purely from a me standpoint. And so now it's like the layers are adding on. I was still also very much integrating getting divorced, leaving my home, leaving my little puppy dog, leaving the place that I had known the entirety of my adult life, and then also entering into a new relationship pretty quickly after that. And then pretty soon after that, in like February, pretty early February if I remember correctly, 2025, Jonathan started getting worse. And things started to go down pretty quickly in the month of February until we finally got a diagnosis. It was March 3rd of 2025 is when we got the official, he had stage 2B of Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I mean, he was to a point where he was having night sweats so bad that he would be getting up multiple times a night, sometimes having to shower multiple times a night, in which case that also very much impacted my sleep as well. And I'm not saying that to be mean or to be rude. I'm saying that it was just a matter of fact. So then the lack of sleep is starting to build up here. And then he gets the diagnosis. There are heavy emotions coming up around that for sure. And a lot of times when I start to get really stressed and overwhelmed with emotions, I isolate. That is my default pattern, is I isolate. Now I'm getting better at not doing that, and it is still easier for me to do that. And some of that absolutely started to happen, especially in the latter part of his treatment. Like the last four or five treatments. So the last 2 or 3 months of his treatments, when I started to feel worse and I got food poisoning, which didn't help anything. We were running back and forth between, we were staying in Phoenix for treatments, in which case we were also getting up incredibly early. I was losing a work day every other week, essentially. I was able to work a little bit. And it was just a lot. I mean, it was just a lot to try and help and support him, but also to watch him and to watch him struggle so much after every single treatment. I mean, we both started getting PTSD like on our drives to Phoenix. Even the last time I drove to Phoenix, let's see, in late January 2026 here. And I still felt nauseous driving there just because I could feel the stress. My body's remembering what that experience is like, and I did not feel good. And so all of these things are just adding up. And then I think it was July of last year, I got food poisoning, and then my belly was never the same. It took many months for me to really get that under control. And that was another layer of stress. Meanwhile, throughout this whole time, my stress is just building and building and building and building. I'm also continuously trying to work 100, full time as a business owner and maintain the business. And we made some big changes last year in the midst of all of this, which I still feel good about. And that doesn't make there were some not easy things from a business perspective that we decided. So just some business decisions last year that were not easy. And so another layer of stress, also making sure like financially we were okay and that side of things. And then it was just a lot. So September 2nd was his final treatment. And coming out of that, I was in a bad place. I can say that now. And I was not in a good place. And I will say I was not in a good place in September. By November, I would probably say November, December, January, February were some really not good months for me. Both from a physical standpoint and that I got the gut health stuff under control, and all I was doing was some drainage pathway support work and a little bit of gut killing is what I did to fix that for reference. So I wasn't doing any intense, crazy protocols. I was on some of the staple things that I have on hand, and that usually includes advanced TEDCA from Cellcore, a binder from Cellcore, and I kind of floated between Viredchem and HMET. Viredchem's a pretty good full spectrum. It does a little bit of heavy metals. It does a little bit of environmental toxins. It does some plastics. It does some helps with viral support and pausing viral replication, because that's, someone with a history of Epstein-Barr virus, chronic Epstein-Barr virus, that's always a concern in the back of my head. And so that was a thing. And then Para 1, Para 2. Which are Para 2 is a broad spectrum antimicrobial that looks at the entirety of the digestive tract, because I wasn't quite sure if it was more stomach, as in like the stomach organ, or my actual belly, gut, small and large intestine. And so Para 2 just goes through and kills all of that stuff. And I kind of went off and on of that as I felt needed, and probably spent the better part of 6 weeks maybe on that. And then I did about 2 weeks of some pro and prebiotics. I also was eating a lot of pro and prebiotic rich foods to help and support. So that's what I did from a gut health perspective then. And I've done big, big, big gut work. I also did not do any full moon challenges last year, which are something that we very much recommend in our practice, anywhere between 1 to 3 times a year, depending on your level of exposure, also depending on your history. So for someone like me, I have a strong history of pretty significant parasite overgrowth issues. So I tend to like to do full moon challenges, which are revolving around specifically parasite work, but the way we do it is we also do a pretty nice little gut scrub of the entire digestive tract. So if there is any buildup from a stomach perspective, things like H. pylori, other things like that, SIBO, yeast and fungal stuff, other parasite kind of issues within the GI tract specifically, those two products, Para 1, Para 2, super supportive. And they did a great job. And then during these full moon protocols, which are typically anywhere between 3 to 7 days, we add in another thing called Para 3, which is the systemic. It goes systemically and addresses parasites. It also works as another broad spectrum antimicrobial and does address some other unfavorable issues around bacteria, yeast, and fungus as well, in addition to the parasites. So I have been doing those for years. I did not do a single one last year. And so coming into this year, late January, early February, I got a flu, maybe of some sort, something. I had a really hard time keeping down food for about 2 weeks. And I can assume it was the flu. I actually took 2 full days off of work for sickness purposes, which I haven't done in I can't tell. I literally do not even know. I think it was when I had a version of the plague. When I was working in the first year I was working in a big box gym, I got incredibly sick one winter and I had to take a couple days off of work. That's the last time I can think of. And that was back in maybe 2016, 27, early 2017. So it's been quite some time. I mean, almost 10 years, like eight at minimum, probably closer to 9 or 10. And so I did some of these full moon protocols coming out of that flu stance because I was tired of messing around with this gut stuff. So I did two in a row. I think I did February and March, and then I took a break, and that did it. So when we talk about maintenance with gut work, yeah, sometimes there is some maintenance work, especially when it comes to high levels of stress. And by the way, I was on stomach acid support the entire time because one of the first things that happens when stress goes up is stomach acid goes down. And knowing that our stomach acid production is such a huge protector from gut overgrowth issues, this was super important for me that this was one of the first things I got on very, very consistently. I just got a big jar of some HCl with pepsin I usually do the ones from Pure Encapsulations, Designed Just for Health, also has a really good one. And that did the trick. And now I feel like my gut is in a really good spot. I will probably do another full moon protocol sometime later this year. I don't quite know when, maybe August, just with timing of travel. And we've got weddings in August and September that we're going to, and some travel that'll happen later this year back to the Southwest part of the country, most likely. So, just kind of forecasting ahead, that's probably when I'll do it. So I'll probably end up with a total of 3 this year, and which is very reasonable in my opinion. It's 1 week. It's not even a whole week of feeling bad. It's usually a few days of not feeling the greatest. For me, I typically do pretty high dosages. I did scale back early this year when I did both of them. The first one I was pretty cautious about just because I know when I go into this killing phase, it is an extra layer of stress. And if I'm trying to mitigate stress, while it's going to be helpful long term, I need to try and minimize what my body's being put through. And so I did a very moderate, especially for me, a very, very moderate one first. And then I did a decent one for me. I will tell you, I go pretty intense in a lot of my full moon protocols just because I can and I have that experience and I feel okay. Generally speaking, I feel okay doing those. I'll have typically some anxiety be present as I'm passing things. I may have some abdominal discomfort as things are moving and shifting. Sleep can be a little hit or miss. Energy can be a little hit or miss. Cognitive function can be a little hit or miss. But by and large, I feel generally okay when I'm doing those. If I'm not feeling good, I will take extra drainage pathway support work. I am always really good about drainage pathway support work in general, which I'm going to come back to here in just a moment. And then I can do some extra work around that if I'm not feeling very good. And I typically do like to do a little extra in preparation and on the tail end of it to make sure my body's really passing and pushing the things out that it doesn't need. So that all is very helpful. And I do feel like that made a big difference without having to do big, extensive protocols, and the maintenance work, especially from a drainage pathway support work and a nervous system standpoint, is incredibly helpful. And those are two really, really big things that we talk to clients about when we look at long-term maintenance work is continuously focus on drainage pathway support work. Think about doing 1 or 2 things a week. Doesn't have to be every day. You don't have to revolve your life around this stuff, but really focus. Just 1 or 2 things a week can go a really long way. And that might be sauna, Epsom salt baths, dry brushing, some manual lymphatic work, castor oil packs, coffee enemas, rebounding, any of those things. And for me right now, castor oil packs, and I'll say even over the last year and a half, castor oil packs have been a staple. I was doing the sauna very consistently until it was a little too harsh for my body. It was a little bit too much. My body started having negative reactions to it. And so I just switched the kind of support I was doing. Castor oil packs for me have always felt very supportive. I'll tell you even now, I I just did one yesterday, and so this is like very fresh in my mind. And Jonathan and I have been talking a lot about this, is, it can help with sleep, which is always good. I try and always do at least 2 or 3 the week before my period because it can help with cramping, it can help with the mood stuff, it can help just your brain with the sensitivity of the shift in hormones. It can be very supportive. Bowel movements, it can be also helpful with that. And yeah, it definitely can help with bowel movements. I do typically have some really good bowel movements the day after I do a castor oil pack. I'm very consistent on a daily basis, but oftentimes I'll have an extra one, which will feel really good. Just so I'm really clearing out my body. And then I also notice mood shifts where just I feel a little bit more grounded, maybe a little bit more emotionally regulated, or it helps me with that regulation piece. So I am a huge fan. And once again, this was a staple for me in the overcoming this burnout process. Also pushing out all of the chemochemicals that I was second-handedly exposed to, and just helping to process out the stress and all that kind of stuff. So that was really important. A big, big thing though was the nervous system piece. And I would say, I always tell people I'm really good in a crisis. If you need someone who can stay grounded, who can stay very clear and be able to show up in a crisis, I am your person. I am great at it. I do feel very confident in a crisis because most of my early life, the vast majority of my early life was a crisis. And so I've always been able to handle the crisis itself. It's when the crisis ends and things really start to catch up with me that things can be a challenge. And I know a lot of you will relate to that and can relate to that, especially those of you with some big capital T trauma from your childhood. If you're the oldest daughter, if you're the oldest granddaughter, let's add another layer there. I am both. I am an only child, so I don't know if that technically counts, but I was the first grandchild and granddaughter, and I definitely feel that for sure. So coming out of this, especially seeing my own health decline again for the first time in many, many, many years, it was alarming. And once again, I can say now, looking back at it, it was a lot. And there was a lot of nervousness on my end and question marks of, holy moly, I'm getting little signs and symptoms and little flashbacks of where I was when I was at my worst, when I was in my full-blown Hashimoto's, EBV, hypothyroid, all the gut stuff, all the cognitive stuff, sleep issues, like all of the things. I'm getting a lot of reminders and a lot of flashbacks to what I felt like and what my life felt like during that time. And that was really scary for me. And it was depressing, and there was a lot of anxiety present around all of those things. And then also, to my detriment, and this is something that Jonathan and I have talked a lot about since coming out of this, is I kept almost all of it to myself because during Jonathan's health crisis, I felt like it was my job to show up for him versus being able to show up for myself and for him. And I had some support here and there during that process, and I accepted some support during that process. And there was a lot I did hold in. And I think it was twofold. One, I didn't want to put something extra on Jonathan because he was as a 34-year-old, he got diagnosed with cancer after already having a history of two traumatic brain injuries and still dealing on a day-to-day basis with those, we'll say, side effects, consequences, lingering issues around those, and then to pile all of my stuff on top of him as well felt like too much. And even crying in front of him and breaking down in front of him, I mean, I wouldn't do it. And I would purposely, if I felt the need to do that and he was around, and I did hold it in until he wasn't around, and then it would come out, I would put myself in a different room on purpose. And I'd be like, I'm gonna go cry in the bedroom. Give me some space. And not that that's not okay, because absolutely asking for some space. And look, I still do that sometimes, where especially if I'm having a harder time accessing an emotion, where I just need some space to be able to like feel it, and then I can have support when I'm actually in the feels of it. And I think another part of it was just my own trauma coming up and just feeling really scared and not wanting to feel those things. And I always talk about, I talk so much about we need to feel our feelings. We need to do all these things. And look, the reality is I'm not perfect either. I struggle. I do the very best that I can, and it is never perfect. And the goal should never be perfection, because none of us are perfect. We are all flawed, and that is okay. The goal is to do our best. And since coming out of that, Jonathan and I have had a ton of conversations, and we went through a pretty rough patch for a handful of months, I would say about 4 or 5 months. We went through coming out of that, went through a really rough patch. And once again, we struggled as we were going through it, and now we're able to reflect back and talk a little bit more openly about a handful of things that came up around it, and which is why I feel comfortable sharing these. And a lot of it was me trying to be strong for him and not wanting to put the burden of all of my stuff onto him. And feeling like, once again, childhood trauma coming straight up here, not wanting to feel like a burden. Because when I am a burden, this is the inner dialogue here. When I am a burden to other people, they do not love me and they leave me. And that is the story my brain was going through a lot of that. And then add in the extra health stuff. Oh, he just went through his own health stuff. By the way, he also recovered incredibly quickly coming out of that, and was able to, man, I mean, just really remarkable how fast physically his body was able to recover from a lot of that. And it was remarkable to see. And then for me, it was an extra layer of, oh my gosh, what is wrong with you? He just went through 12 rounds of chemotherapy, intense chemotherapy, and here I am having not gone through that, and I'm not able to recover. I wasn't able to work out anymore. Sleep was very, very, very delicate. It was often not good. My luteal phase was often a nightmare. And once again, I was landing in what I would consider, so it started off more like borderline early perimenopause. I was having some warm flashes. My luteal phase, especially the week before my period, sleep would become a really big issue, some irritability stuff. But then it really started to take a turn, and it was right after I ovulated. Boom. Or not really, it's not ovulated. Boom. I was in a horrible place where really dark, intrusive kinds of thoughts were coming up. Suicide ideation was coming back up. And that is not something I've experienced since my early 20s. That was scary too. Here's the thing. I was able to recognize exactly where I was just because of the knowledge I have. And when these things come up in my brain, I'm able to make a little bit of a distinction of, hey, this is coming up for you. This is not yours. This is a variety of factors going on. And yes, there are very, very, very valid feelings in here. Feelings of being depressed, feelings of anxiety, feelings of just things are really hard and not knowing really what to do to come out of those. And add in the extra relationship stress of that and the hormone piece. And it was a tough time. And there was a conversation that Jonathan and I had that really shifted things. And I, by the way, I might tear up just a little bit. I can feel it already coming up in me right now. But there was a conversation that we had, and I remember we talked about this in our wedding ceremony. Okay, it is coming. It is coming. And there was one night we were having dinner, and it was after dinner, and he just reached for my hand and was just told me it felt so honest and so open of just, let me help you. And I don't know what it was about that moment, but I felt like all of a sudden things clicked. And this is what can happen when we're talking about trauma healing, nervous system regulation, breaking a lot of these patterns. And for me, finally, it clicked in my brain that I can rely on him. Thinking that he's going to leave me, all of these feelings are past traumas coming back up really strongly. And I need to make a choice right now, and I need to choose to let them go and to not let this rule the rest of my life, because it is not serving me. It is also not the reality. It is a reality I am creating in my own brain. And after that, I really felt like I was able to let him in, let my guard down, share really what I was feeling, which was really, really hard, by the way. Yeah, some of you might get a real kick out of this. There was one time by the way, him and I laugh about this now. There was one time we had one conversation. It was one of our earlier conversations in this kind of struggle period where we had a big conversation. I completely shut down and I could not cope. I said, I need a day or two before we can continue talking about this. And I need to feel my feelings, and then I need to get some thoughts together to be able to share them with you. And we did that. We put a pause on there, and I wrote out a bunch of things I wanted to say and share, and not verbatim. I just did bullet points, but it was almost a full page, single spaced of bullet points of things I wanted to share. And I made him like turn away from me because I didn't think I'd get through it by looking at him, which is such a huge trauma response. It's this trouble that fighting and uncomfortable conversations are bad. It's this programming that fighting, arguing, working through these things means our relationship is not in a good place, meaning our relationship is over. And that, once again, that is not the reality of the situation. And so, once again, working on retraining my brain. And by the way, I was doing a lot of brain retraining work around this time, and it helped. I didn't feel like it was really moving the needle for me, but it was helping. And this is how a lot of our nervous system patterns work. One of the biggest things I often talk about is trying out a lot of different things when it comes to your nervous system, trying different forms of meditation and brain retraining, brain rewiring, somatic type work, journaling, breath work, different types of somatic kind of work, therapy, different kinds of therapy, EMDR, psychedelics can definitely play a role in all of this. And there are so many different types of nervous system work. And for me, brain retraining has been such a staple in my practice over the years, and helping really to make big, large, permanent types of shifts in a lot of these patterns. And it wasn't cutting it. And so for me, that was also a challenge of this tool that I have found such relief and such comfort and such effectiveness in over the years, not really working. And so I started just opening myself up to looking at different things, looking at other tools I had in my toolbox, but also looking outside of some of my regular tools. And I looked at working with a handful of people. None of it felt quite right. Jonathan and I had talked about me working with a therapist again, just once again, like a lot of the dark thoughts, intrusive thoughts that were coming in, would that be supportive at that time? And I had looked at one of my old therapists, but also looking at some other therapists, and once again, like nothing felt quite right until I came back to energy healing. And this is, I mean, I know I have shared this, and there is no affiliation. I'm not sharing this to promote her, to promote her services. And I will tell you, Christina Rice's app, Next Level You, she also goes by Christina the Channel, is her like handle on different things. Her website's Christina the Channel. This is someone that I have worked with for a long time, and she actually came and did an in-person energy session with me while early on in the cancer treatment. And she just happened to be in the area, and I had reached out to her and I said, hey, like, I can't make it to your retreat, and like, here's kind of what's going on. Would you be open to coming and doing an energy session, or I'll drive to you? Like whatever is easier. But I really feel like that could be very beneficial. And it was for reference. And so coming back around, I kept seeing more and more things about, she has an app where she does guided energy work and some different kind of meditation, affirmation kind of work. And I said, I just, for some reason, my brain had some hesitations around, oh, energy work can't be super effective from a guided kind of standpoint. It doesn't work like that. And I know better, of course. Energy it does not know a time and a place. And so for me, once I started doing some of this energy work, daily guided energy work via her app, major changes here. And I don't think it was just that. I think it was a combination of a variety of things, of all of the work that I have done, all of the work that Jonathan and I were doing, and really trying to work through where we were. And there was hurt on both sides that was challenging for us individually to understand, let alone be able to share those. And then also coming out of this in who are we individually, because it happened so early on in our relationship, and there was such a huge, what we felt like a timeout in our relationship, and a lot of the work that we were trying to do with and for each other. And that got put on a huge timeout. And then I didn't feel like I was in a place to return back to that. And so I was really struggling with that. And Jonathan was having a hard time understanding where I was. And when I got the flu and seeing how sick I was, that helped him understand a little bit as to like emotionally where I was last year, and just being very nervous for him, his health. Was he, very treatable cancer, and it's still cancer. And that's a really big thing. And so watching him, having him watch me not be able to hold food down, to start to lose weight, to start, and I was not in the best spot for those few weeks. And even a couple weeks after that, I was having a little bit of a hard time, having him watch me go through that. It helped him better understand maybe where I was emotionally last year and some of the things that I was working on through processing. And yeah, so her app really made a big difference. And then not only did it make a big difference in helping me come back to myself, is the way I like to explain it. It helped me really let go of some things that weren't mine, help me process emotionally, physically, mentally, energetically, some of the things that I had gone through the last handful of years, and come back to me. And that's really where I feel like now, where I've really come back to myself. And by the way, I'm still doing that work every single day. There's a few that I have just as staples. I know I hold, just with the amount of people that I work with, especially right at this moment. I'm very deep in the client work. So I'm working with a lot of clients right now. And I can hold on to the energies for sure. Even I do all kinds of protection work and setting up boundaries and different things like that. And the reality is I still hold on to a lot from clients, and it's not good for me. And so part of my job is I need to make sure that I'm not doing that, and I'm letting as much of that go as I can. And so I sometimes, even on certain weeks, I do extra work, like extra, especially at the end of the day. If I've had 7, 8, 9 hours worth of calls in a day. At the end of the day, that is the first thing I want to do is just let me release all these people's energies that I've just been holding on to, and I really need to let it go. And so that is super helpful. I've done a lot of work around money, finance, the business itself. And by the way, that also has made a significant difference. And I'm gonna share, and I think I'm gonna do another episode on the business side of things here in a bit, and so I'm gonna wait and share some of those things there. But this kind of work not only helped me come back to myself, I will say emotionally, energetically, but it also has helped me physically. I do feel a big physical difference. I am working out at least 3 or 4 days a week right now, usually 2 days of strength training and 2 days of yoga right now, sometimes a little bit more. And then I'm trying to walk more on top of that and feeling really good with all of that, feeling like I have the energy for it, feeling like my body's capacity is able to handle that again. And by the way, I wasn't working out. I could not work out for over 6 months. And so when people ask me, how long does it take to come out of burnout? What does that time frame really look like? The answer is we don't know. And this was another challenge for Jonathan too, when we were talking about my health. And he said, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you adding in more protocols and doing more things? And I'll tell you, I thought a lot about it. And the reality is it didn't feel right. It felt like for me that the biggest thing I needed was rest. And from the outside, that may have looked like laziness. It wasn't, it was rest. It was resting physically, it was resting emotionally, energetically, mentally, all of it. I just needed rest for a bit. And now coming out of it, it is, I feel like I'm not back to where I'd like to be yet from looking at many different things. And man, the last few months, I have really come a long way. And I am very proud of myself for sticking it out and really listening to my own self and taking that time to rest when and where I could, even though absolutely there were thoughts coming into my brain at many, many, many times of, Megan, you should be doing more. Megan, you need to work more. You need to be going outside more. You need to be working out more. You need to be. And when I really listened to my body, it said rest. And I needed that. And now we are, not quite a year later, and I'm not back to where I was. But I'm very much on my way there right now. And I think that's really important to understand that, we talk about consistency with eating and movement and water and all of these things, super important. And look, for me, the nutrition, the water standpoint, some of the basics. I was doing adrenal cocktails the entire time. I'm still doing those by and large almost most days for reference to just to continue to support that physical side of my body. But at the end of the day, I really needed to spend some time working on some bigger, deeper trauma patterns. And I also needed the rest to help my body just recover. And so if you are in a similar position, I know you want to lose weight. I know you want to go do 10 million different things that you felt so limited by for so long. You want to be able to eat the things that you want to be able to eat and have the flexibility with that and to be able to work how you want and not have to sleep as much as you need to not have to take breaks the way you want to. I know. And I got a big reminder of that in the last year. And once again, I'll tell you as a practitioner, and I don't feel quite the same way as I used to, but I know, especially if you are a practitioner, if you are someone in the health and wellness space from a professional standpoint, And by the way, if you are working with someone in the health and wellness space, a lot of times we think we need to be perfect. We need to be fully healed. We need to have all of the answers and be in the perfect place ourselves and remain there to be able to show up the right way for clients, quote unquote, the right way. And the reality is that's not true. Life happens. We all go through stuff. None of us are perfect as people, as practitioners, as any of the things. And I got a big reminder of what it's like to be in some of the really hard and dark places over the last year. And as hard as those were, I know I'm better for it. I know I'm a better person. I know I'm a better wife. I know I'm a better practitioner. I know I'm a better boss or manager or leader, whatever we really want to call it. And I know I'm able to show up in an even deeper way. And I already showed up in a pretty deep way for our clients, but I'm able to show up in an even deeper way than I could before. And I've learned a lot of lessons. I've learned a lot of lessons around, you know, dropping the patterns, dropping the armor, dropping a lot to allow someone else into my life in a very, very deep, intimate way that doesn't feel the most comfortable all the times. And I'll tell you, we have never been more solid, and we both feel that way. And we both have felt that way, and we both have talked about it. We had our wedding a few weeks ago, almost a month ago now, as of the recording of this, and we are both so solid right now in ourselves and our relationship. And once again, there was this really bumpy road, and it was hard. I didn't know if I really honestly did not know if we were going to make it. There were some alternative plans being made as a just in case, and on both of our sides for reference. And we're both, I think, way better off having come through that. And we also know that we can hope that that's the only time we'll go through it. And the reality is this other hard things are going to come up. We talk a lot about, for me especially, I've been through some pretty hard things. I lost the person who raised me, and then I lost my favorite person within a 2 years time span. And those were not the same people. And that was a really challenging time as well. To lose a parent, and to lose a parent where I did not have a good relationship with that parent, especially the last few years of her life. I know what that's like. I know what that's like to have to set boundaries, and the grief and confusion that can come along with that. And once again, I think that helped me a lot as a practitioner and as a human, as a woman as well. And knowing that none of us make it out of this life alive, and what that's going to look like for Jonathan, what that's going to look like for both of us. And not throwing anything out there, but we have an animal that we both love with all of our hearts, and just it's going to be different. We haven't, neither one of us have lost a pet like that. We both had pets growing up and lost pets, and felt heartbreak with that. But this is different. It's going to be different as an adult for sure, and we're aware of that, and other things that are going to come up in our lives. So, and now we have even more tools to come back to ourselves and then come back to each other as a result of that. So, and I do also want to acknowledge that, as I think in a lot of relationships, especially because we mostly work with women, a lot of this healing type work is often led by the woman. And Jonathan has done plenty of things over the last year, especially the last, we'll say 6 months, to help him be a better leader, to be a better man, to be a better partner. And some of that involved me directly. Some of it didn't. Some of it was his own work and coming up with his own tools and learning how to relax a little bit and to support me and allow me to listen to my body, even when it doesn't necessarily make the most logical sense. That intuition, I have a strong connection to my intuition, and we need to listen to that too. And so working through that. So, Yeah, the next thing I want to just touch on again is the PMDD side of things, and newfound respect for any woman dealing with PMDD. Do not wish that on anyone. And I'll also say that I have been in those places that was not hormonally driven anyways. And so the trauma of those things coming back up was also very challenging for me. For me, that has looked like progesterone support for sure. The Vitex chast tree, and I know I've mentioned that a few times before, gone a long way. By the way, I'm still taking that sometimes, and I kind of, once again, I'm listening to my body. Some months I'm taking it for like 2 or 3 days. Other times I'm taking it for closer to 2 weeks. Just kind of depends on the month, kind of has depended on my stress levels and other things going on. And I do not think I will be on it forever for reference. And for right now, it does still feel pretty supportive. Work is very busy right now. I am working a lot right now. And so, and that will not be the change. I'm coming out of that season over the next month. And there was already plans to do that, all that kind of stuff. So, my goal is kind of after the fall into the winter is to really make an effort to come off of that and to stay off of it. And if I do need other hormonal support, working through that more nutritionally than anything else. And the nervous system piece goes a long, long, long way for that. I'm also doing some foods and focusing on some different types of foods to support my body nutritionally. Doing a lot of dark leafy green veggies. Oftentimes that looks like spinach, cooked spinach, arugula and or collard greens, cooked collard greens. I do a salad most days for lunch right now. Probably I will say 4 or 5 days a week. I'm doing a salad for lunch with an arugula base. And I feel like that's been very helpful. Cruciferous veggies, we're going pretty hard on that. Jonathan also needs more veggies and more fiber too. So, never a bad thing for any of us, but doing that to really help support estrogen metabolism. I do a lot for phase 2 detoxification. Protein intake's quite high. I do a lot of liver drainage pathway support work. Also, making sure I've boosted my fat up a little bit. So, I'm doing a little bit more fat in my diet, whether that's through nuts and seeds, especially nuts and seeds. Pumpkin seeds are a big staple right now. If you listen to the episode from last week, pumpkin seeds came up a lot to support specifically estrogen and testosterone levels. They can also be good for progesterone too. So I'm pretty heavy on the pumpkin seeds. Also, olive oil, fattier fish. And, I'm like tonight, I'm making a homemade pesto with salmon for dinner. So nice, really good, healthy fats in there and avocados and just different types of fats to really make sure I'm producing enough cholesterol, which we know is the base of really all hormone production. So I'm doing a variety of other things, but more lifestyle things, and then adding in a little bit of progesterone, so indirect progesterone support as that continues to feel good, as I'm really continuing to focus on stress as much as I can. The adrenal cocktails, I'm taking magnesium glycinate at night as well to help and support with that. And like I said, my gut's in a pretty darn good spot right now after the work I've done, between last year and early this year again. And that plays a big role in overall hormone production, hormone clearance, but also neurotransmitter production, especially the serotonin, which can also play a big role in PMDD. So working through that can go a long way. So if you are a woman struggling with PMDD, I also want to acknowledge birth control is not the only option here, and SSRI is not the only option. I also want to share a bit of we can call it a fun fact, but it's really a study that was done, and I'm going to link the study in the show notes here so you can actually go through this. And it was a study done on, I'm just making a note here so I don't forget. So it was done between now I'm forgetting an SRI, yeah. So not an SSRI, SRI, I believe, and Vitex. When it came to emotional support and relief of symptoms around emotional support. And they were almost tied in how effective they were from an emotional perspective. Now, it was a relatively small study. However, I mean, the results were pretty eye-opening for even me, and realizing how much progesterone, especially with all of the really, really deep dives I've been doing on hormones and all of the things that hormones influence, really incredible to see almost the same. I mean, I think there was a 5% difference where Vitex scored 5% lower in overall improvement, but it was over, both of them were over 60% improvement based on this study. And I'll tell you, the Chastity Vitex, almost no side effects. I had a couple things pop up when I first started it. I'm also the only person I've ever seen have side effects for reference. And when taken appropriately, and to not have the side effects of some of these medications. I mean, I felt like a zombie at best when I was on all of the meds, all the antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds. I was on a zombie at best. I felt way more suicidal at worst. And to see, and coming off of those can be very challenging. You need to come off slowly. I went cold turkey, which caused a whole host of other types of issues, which, once again, do not ever do that. Please work with someone, whether it's your doctor or find a different doctor to help you come off of these things. And some of us can also help and support, but it should always be done with the approval of your doctor and under your doctor's guidance and supervision. Legally required to say that. So really incredible. And doctors don't recommend it, which is mind-blowing. So this might be a good option for some women, not all women, and it can be a good option for many women. And there are a couple studies. I'll share another study here too in the show notes here around Vitex and some of the effectiveness where it's really been shown, and it's really incredible. And, it's one of the things that we will use in our practice, especially with a lot of women who come in with a lot of hormonal struggles. And we know there's underlying mold issues. And we know the mold issues are going to take some time to really address. And we feel like we need some additional support immediately to get some symptom relief to be able to function on a more day-to-day basis and be able to have some stability mentally and emotionally, and to not spend half of our month feeling like a total psycho crazy person and just not feeling like ourselves at all. It's no way to live. It's no way none of us should be required to live, especially long term. And so many women are living like this. There are reasons why. And unfortunately, Western medicine is not designed for many things. For many things, and I'll leave it at, it's not designed to help with women's health because they don't have that knowledge and they don't look at these studies, and they're just not trained. Birth control is the option. SSRIs and other medications, very similar from a mental and emotional standpoint, are the gold standard, which is very unfortunate because there are many other options available to us that cannot have the same side effects and can have no side effects for many of us. So it's very unfortunate, but that has been a real game changer for me and for many clients that we work with. And once again, it's as we're addressing the bigger issues going on, and it can help and support us in that. And the goal is not to have to stay on it long term. And once again, that is my goal as well, is not to stay on it long term. And it has been a beautiful tool to be able to use, to be able to still sleep through the night, to have a lot of just emotional regulation, to not feel that, level of changing of emotions, to not feel that level of irritability and just rage that absolutely does not even feel like mine, to not have those intrusive thoughts, to feel calmer, to have my body and just joints and an overall like physical body to feel a whole lot better. And this is why I talk about hormones and women's health so much, because so many of us we're never taught, and we don't know all the things that hormones influence ever. Sometimes we never know this. And some of us only kind of learn the secondhand when we go through perimenopause, which is so unfortunate. and and there are so many other tools and resources that are available to us. So I think I'm going to hold off on the skincare for another episode, but I did want to share all of these things. And I know so many of you are going through stressful situations, have gone through stressful situations, feel a lot of pressure on yourself to figure things out, to feel pressure to do more and be more and be better and do better and all of these things. And just, I always think it's helpful to share our experiences and to share things that have worked for me, and once again, I see this all the time. And I know my experience is not a unique one, which is why I think it's also valuable to share, because I know so many of us struggle and go through so many of these things and so many of these similar thought patterns and trauma patterns and all of these things, that I think it's always so worthwhile for me to be able to share my own experiences and things that have worked for me. But also, I know so many of these things also work for other women, as a practitioner who's worked with so many women. And yeah, and also just to share that, look, like, I'm not perfect either, and I do my best to make sure that as a practitioner, I know it's easy to put some of us on a pedestal, and we shouldn't. Yes, I have a lot of knowledge. Yes, I have a lot of experience personally and professionally, and that doesn't mean I'm perfect either. It doesn't mean I don't also struggle with my own things and work to come out of it, and have to use all kinds of tools and resources, and find new tools and resources and on different occasions. And I still firmly believe, with like the full of my heart, that all of us can stay healed long term. And just the more we can listen to our bodies and be in tune, and also have a deeper understanding of our own physiology and how our body works, especially from a hormonal perspective, it just goes such a long way. So at the very least, out of this episode, I hope you just don't feel quite so alone. At the very best, maybe you got a few other tools or lessons or things to think about. So thank you for listening. As always, please like, subscribe, follow. 5-star reviews really, really, really do mean the world to us. I do read all of them. We get alerts when we get new reviews, and yes, it does always bring a smile to my day, and just make me feel good and know just further confirmation that all the work that we are doing, all the extra time and effort that I'm spending, especially right now in the last few months, to really build up the business, to make sure we have some of the best practitioners available to you guys with the most educational background, but also compassion and tools and experience and knowledge and all of the things, and also help to just educate. Just knowledge is power, and the more we can do that, the better. So once again, thank you for listening. The reviews mean a lot. All the views, all the downloads mean so much to me and to all of us within our practice here. So thank you, and we'll see you next week.